Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the adventure Dragonbowl, designed by Duncan Rhodes for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Strap yourselves in because this is a big one. This is over a 300-page adventure. Now, you might be thinking, holy crap, a 300-page adventure book that's going to rival the length of an official book, right? Like Tyranny of Dragons, Prince of the Apocalypse, Curse of Strahd, all those. I would temper your expectations on that, which is to say, I think this is a really, really cool idea. I'm a big fan of the theme. I think it's a really neat idea, and there's so much content information here. The caveat is there's not a strong central story here. It's almost more of like a source book, like your your Eberron's or your Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica or something. I was going to say Strixhaven. Even Strixhaven actually did have a pretty lengthy campaign of, linear events happening. This one, there is an adventure flowchart, right? It's designed for 6th level. Your party is part of this a series of gladiatorial arenas called the Dragonbowl. It's all very fun and campy, and it draws from a lot of pop culture. There's an airship. There's sponsored by Bloodweiser, and all the team names have really funny names, Apocalypse Drow and all this. And I like a lot of that stuff. That's great. I think it fits, a lot of what I like about D&D, which is very much more beer and pretzels versus Lord of the Rings. But I was expecting more of okay, that's a cool idea for a setting, is this kind of underground series of gladiatorial matches that are actually huge and big budget and enormous, not just like little back alley fights. And this is this is literally like Super Bowl level or Olympics level craziness, and that's really, really cool and an awesome idea for a campaign. With the big but being, it doesn't actually do a big story here. Instead, it's basically the matches themselves, and then all the NPCs, the different locations, and all these different little side quests and events you can do. All of those kind of make up the story. I will say it ends pretty well. It does have a very fun climax, and then followed by a meeting with the game master, and there's actually a little bit of a dungeon crawl at the end. So it does kind of go through that. So I think it ends pretty strongly. But in terms of creating those kind of narrative through hooks, it just kind of relies on the DM to try and make all those decisions and connections, and that's a lot of work for the DM. But this is, if you're willing to put in the work, this is an incredible source book for creating that kind of adventure. Which somewhere the designer even says this is, obviously not a one shot whatsoever. This is probably like a solid 10 to 15 sessions or so, and it's just for, again, 6th level. I believe you level up to 7th when you're maybe halfway through or something, and then you level up to 8th by the end. So also, it takes place beneath Waterdeep. I don't think it takes place where Skullport is, but somewhere in that kind of zone. And it brings in a lot of these diverse people, as well as monstrous races that compete, which is really, really fun and a good opportunity to role play with lizard folk and ogres and gnolls and all that shit, which is really cool. But it also ties into Waterdeep Dragon Heist in some fun ways, because I believe the leveling works out where you can go from Dragon Heist right into this, as well as you could tie it into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. There's some factions and things that have some cool connections in with that campaign. So specifically, if you're operating your campaign in and around Waterdeep, this one and those campaigns, this one actually fits in very, very well. And even though it's about gladiatorial combat and arena, and that's a big part of it, the designer really goes above and beyond in making this a very NPC-heavy adventure. Yes, there are rules for actually fighting in the arena, and that's the whole point, is to advance and get further along. But all these events and all of the participants, as well as the higher staff, and there's just so many. I mean, literally chapters, I'm looking at the table of contents right here, chapters 3, 4, and 5 are all just NPCs. That's maybe not quite half the book is literally detailing all the chapter 3 alone is the official staff, which has like a dozen different, there's the games master who has a whole page of information. There's, the head of entertainment, there's head of security, all these different folks. And then chapter 4 is basically everybody else who's not part of the staff and not part of the gladiators, which includes a lot of neat tie-ins to the Waterdeep campaign. So Xanathar, Jarlaxle, Devil Star Song, just all these different Volos in there, Magnus Goldfist. They all have different roles and things they're doing in this kind of, illicit, underground, very popular gladiatorial matches. And then chapter 5 is 40 pages of all 16 teams that are competing along with the players' teams. And you get detailed notes on like all of these different NPCs. It's crazy. And frankly, I hate complaining about having too much content, but it is overwhelming to try and parse this out and focus on. I just don't see how anybody could maintain that many NPCs at once and try to make them all interesting and compelling and make it worth having them all versus just slashing that number in half and instead replacing that with actual like strong narrative through lines about people that instead of having just kind of these one-off side quests, having more important plans in motion that reach to a satisfying conclusion is what I would have kind of rather had, although the content here is really, really well done. So I'm already kind of doing an overarching thing because it's just with 300 pages, it's literally going to be impossible for me to try to go through everything and do a deep dive like I normally do, but I'm going to try to go at least chapter by chapter and kind of show you what we're looking at. So chapter 1 introduces the concept of the Dragonbowl, which is literally like if you took a classic gladiator, arena type match, literally think of like the 2000 film Gladiator or something, and turn it into a highly modern, commercialized affair, basically, and everything. And almost like those future, and I believe the designer even says, like, hey, I took, inspiration from a lot of, Running Man and all those fun futuristic game things. There's a lot of that. And I would also mention the fact that if you were against like guns and, pseudo arcane technology in your games, you're really not going to like this adventure whatsoever because it goes hard into that stuff to the point where I think, there it says right there. Yeah. Mad Max, Running Man, Battle Royale, Hunger Games. To the point where I think this campaign may actually fit better in Eberron than it would Forgotten Realms, technically, because of just the high level of magical and really extra fantastical stuff that's going on here. It would be a big ask for, I think, a lot of DMs and world builders. Obviously, if you're having a low magic world, this is not something you're going to want to run, which is too bad because I think having a, gladiator storyline in those kind of games would still be very compelling because in this one, the designer has to go above and beyond and say, okay, well, there's mages around that can counterspell and there's rules about what kind of spells you can cast. Everybody's got these, wands they can use to literally Hunger Games style, like bring in healing drops to people. And there's tons of really great stuff in here, but if you don't like that very relatively high magic world, even in this, underground sports arena, basically, then I think it's going to be a big turnoff. And especially all the gags and jokes are going to be a big turnoff if you're not that kind of DM and you don't want to run that kind of game either. There's a lot of, really going over the top with, you can tell some serious stories as well, but it's a lot of over the top jokes and kind of elbowing and like, you get that reference and all that, which I think works well for me. The whole thing, again, it feels like kind of a NASCAR match or something where, again, there's just tents and pavilions and there's carnival games you can play. It's not just the arena matches, which is something that I thought we were going to get is basically just, okay, there's a gladiator thing somewhere, there's a bunch of matches, and here's a story that takes place. Instead, it's a whole big location area that really just takes over this huge, there's just camps set up where all the different races and people come and, they've got all their tents set up to watch their different people. And it's just, it's very, very impressive from just a pure content standpoint. So chapter 1 is just giving you all that information, backstory about the Dragonbowl, tells you about, it does have an adventure flow chart, but again, what page are we on for that? Okay, here we go. But it's very, it just goes through, okay, here's the different rounds, which are just you fighting all these different gladiatorial matches. And then basically all the ones in between are just kind of events or social role-playing scenes that can happen in between. They're not really like advancing story stuff so much. And then there's stuff in the middle that's even just additional, like, kind kind of random little events you can introduce. And, they're all fun. I think it's good content. Don't get me wrong. I think this is all really great stuff, but all of this stuff reminds me of just side quests. It would, it's like if you took a video game RPG, they often have at least one, maybe a couple like big hub. It's usually a city or a town that has all these different multiple NPCs and side quests and branching things coming off of it. That's really what the designer has done with this location, which I don't know if we have. Okay, here we go. So this is a player version of the location, the arena. But what the designer done is basically turned the arena thing into a hub location that just doesn't actually really have a main quest. Instead, it's just, here's the events that are going to happen each day. And obviously headlined by the actual gladiatorial arena you're going to do, but then in between there's all these little side stories and events you can do. And again, a good DM can create a main story out of there, and obviously you can have a lot of fun with all these different little events and side quests. There's even a little preliminary bunch of mini games you can do: stirred shooting, lava leaping, halfling tossing, which seems like a lot of players and player characters have a problem with. There's one little side quest you can do where you can free like one of the halflings, but what if you wanted to free all of them? That doesn't really have any notes for there. There's something that looks very inspired by the dino races from Port Nyanzaru and Tomb of Annihilation. There's a little mini game you can play for that. There's a whole setup where you have to choose like even how to get here. There's 3 different paths you can choose, either through the caves, through I think an underground waterway, or just teleport. The first 2 having like some combat encounters between, while the third one just costs you extra money. It's kind of a neat little mutually exclusive branching path. That's all in chapter 1. Oh, the code of conduct is a great example for the humor level, by the way, that you'll be expecting here. So no drawing weapons, no casting spells, no stealing, no murdering. Number 5 is, in case of murdering, you must dispose of body or pay 100 gold pieces cleanup fee. Number 6 is no shitting, except in the dragon pits, Dragonbowl's official latrines, which are powered by ochre jellies. No unofficial beer or merchandise within 300 yards of the arena because they're selling the Bloodweiser beer. Just a lot of really funny. Pets are not allowed inside any buildings, nor are they permitted to eat any attendees. Anyone killing a registered contender, by the way, there was no murdering earlier, must take their place in the arena or pay a 5,000 gold piece fine. That's the kind of humor level that you're going to get. It's a lot of satirical lambasting of our capitalist consumer culture and sporting events. All of that I think is actually very, very well done. But again, if that's not the tone, if you're wanting to run a more serious like gladiator style thing, this is not what it does at all. And if you probably could have assumed that from the cover page, by the way, which had one of the teams on there, is that this is more of a very funny, campy, but I think there's a good way of doing that and a bad way of doing that, and I think this is honestly a good way of doing that. It's very well written. It's funny, but it doesn't seem like it's try hard funny. It makes a lot of good jokes and gags, but then it has a ton of really legitimately great content and pretty good rules on all the different things that it can do, including how the arena works. The fact that the arena master can summon in or open monster pits full of different monsters, as well as like spawn in like magic items and power-ups, literally like a goddamn video game. But it works in the context of the arena, again, assuming you're okay with that kind of high magic kind of world that you're doing. Okay, here's the challenges we're going through, which are the little mini games at first. Then we've got the beforehand festival plaza. I mean, look at all the different things you can do, all these different encounters with these major players and characters. This is also probably too much for an actual table when you've got literally like a paragraph for every entry, but a lot of this is like the seeds of giving you later events and quests, but they're all, picture NPCs, a little yellow exclamation point above their head. It's a lot of side quests. Now it's good. I think it's a lot of fun, but I kept waiting basically for like, okay, what is the main quest here? And I went back and looked at the adventure flow chart and like, what is the main quest? Is basically just participate in the games. And then at the very end of the games, you ostensibly, hopefully your players won, or you've done something wrong. You won the finale. There is one cool climactic thing that kind of happens with the Xanathar, and then you basically get to go see the games master and find out, of course, that he's been cloning people instead of paying them off, and there's a little bit of a dungeon crawl there. So that's basically the main quest. I was hoping for a little bit more, I don't know, intrigue and interest in things that felt more like a firm main quest versus just all these little side quests. But I will say all those little side quests are pretty great. Um, it's also weird that we go through. So again, chapter 2 is just all the preamble before the games start, and then the next 3 chapters are just the NPCs, which means you have to make it like over 100 pages into this text before you get to the actual like arena part of this arena campaign, which is a very bold choice, and that's what partially tells me there's probably too much here, which is a weird complaint to always give to something, because there's a lot of, I understand, a lot of work was poured into this. The amount of details for all these NPCs is just jaw-droppingly incredible. But I would think, for at least for me, and maybe a lot of DMs, it's probably too much. There's probably too many NPCs. There's too many gladiator combatants. There's just a lot going on that I feel like you could shave all of this in half and still have plenty of content to work with. And then I would want a deeper dive into some of the NPCs and make it so, you know, the one guy who's been kind of blackmailed by Mert the moneylender, who is the head of entertainment or something, maybe he's got this whole plan to overthrow, you know, and that becomes more of the main quest. You turn one of your, you know, well-developed side quests into a bigger main quest, which, you know, I understand any DM can do with this, but make that part of your actual material, and I think I would have responded to that a lot better versus just having pages and pages of NPCs to work with. But it's good content. It really is. Like, again, you got a dozen of these, just people who work for, and Games Master being the biggest one, who has a modified version of the combat wheelchair, has a dragon chair, which has even more souped up abilities. Hopefully it doesn't go into that bad stereotype of like the villain is somebody who's very disabled, and because they have that disability that motivates them to be a villain. You don't like to see that very much, and that's kind of a bad stereotype. Thankfully, there is one character who's in a dragon chair earlier on who's like just a good character, so that kind of helps offset. But I will say that at least this character has, you know, some backstory and context for that a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I felt weird about having that. It feels like kind of an old stereotype that we're trying to move past from, I think. But he goes into a whole cloning thing, which is interesting. I also wish that, unfortunately, the Games Master here, I believe, is the only character who has an original portrait. And this is partially my argument, again, with having fewer NPCs, is maybe that would open up the budget to allow us to have some original character art. There's even a sidebar at some point that's like, hey, maybe you should use art. Yeah, right here. Picture this. You know, maybe you could use art to give your players more personality, and you can look up stuff on Pinterest and ArtStation. No. You give me that art and for your awesome NPCs that you've created, which, you know, I would want to use more of and create, you know, these compelling stories out of and all this. And if that's the case, then, you know, again, slash the number of NPCs in half, but the ones that are remaining, give me that, you know, cool original art, and then flesh out their stories even further. And I think that would be what I would prefer, even though there's, again, a lot of really cool stuff here. There's a genie who's the main showman who does all the announcing stuff, but he's been enslaved, and there's a partially thing where you can kind of help him. I mean, almost everybody's got something going on that you can kind of work for them, or they want to, you know, get something done. It's all a bunch of shit. I mean, again, it's an underground freaking gladiator arena. There's all kinds of shady goings on that you can take advantage of, which is a lot of fun. So I think we're going to skip to, so chapter 4 is a lot of tie-ins, by the way, with Dragon Heist and Dungeons of Mad Mage, with all the different NPCs that can show up that you can work with or not work with. That can, you know, act as patrons or act as villains or everything else. It's all very moldable, which is very nice for DMs. The Gladiators, again, 16 fucking teams, each of them with 4 members, although you can have an optional 5th member if you have 5 players. If you have more than that, you're kind of out of luck. But 90% of them use existing stat blocks. However, they're usually given something extra. So it might be given like some kind of +1 weapons or better armor or something, which is kind of neat. So your players might not be able to completely metagame the information. But here's what's awesome. Every single one of these gladiators, see if I can get to my notes. They have their story, their tactics, special team features, and extra story events. So that could include, you know, obviously their whole backstory together. And a lot of them have really fun. You know, there's the Cackle Gang, or a bunch of gnolls. The Shifty Blades of Grey is a fucking great name for a group of Dwergar. The Furry and the Furious, which is a gang of bugbears employed by the Xanathar. Apocalypse Drow are employed by Jarlaxle. Wildcats are a bunch of criminal tabaxi. Lizard Blizzard, of course, is your lizard folk. Just really, really fun ideas, and they all have different, they're basically all 4 or 5 person teams with different slightly unique stat, which, by the way, takes full advantage of Volos. I believe did this very well, which was to take stuff like Dwergar and Yuan-Ti and lizard folk and all those humanoid kind of monsters and give them multiple variants and stat blocks. So this takes a big advantage of having that Volos stuff. On the other hand, if you don't have Volos, I don't believe those stat blocks are repeated here. I think only the new stuff is actually repeated, so you will need to have Volos to actually take advantage of all of those. I don't think we have those like alternate means if you don't have that book. But this is really, really impressive because not only are we given their backstories, team tactics means that when they fight as a team, they get these extra benefits. So they might be like certain reactions or immunities or extra attacks or something cool that happens to make it so it's even further cool when you fight them. Even if you fought all of these different variants before, you're not going to know how this particular fighting team works as a team, which is a neat idea. That includes any special equipment they might have, or the fact that some of them are, for example, this Dr. Guest is a bar guest, which is kind of like a goblin werewolf thing. Let me look at his fucking. I wish we had more original character art because this is just fucking amazing, which I think is the other big piece because it was the cover page. These two are vampire spawns who are very much antagonists in basically just, again, one. It'd be cool if they were like repeat, ultimate villains, but they have kind of one sequence in this parade event that you can do, and a Deep Scion who's also, you don't know it's a Deep Scion until the middle of the combat arena fight. And then they also gain, so a lot of them have all these different special story events that you can engage in. Like the Pirate Queen, Carlotta, can openly basically sleep with a PC, but during the foreplay, she will like slip a drug to them and try to fuck them up before the fight. There are the Wildcats are just dirty fighting tabaxi. The Awful Orphans are good-natured and don't actually want to participate. There's a little side quest you can go on to help get them out of the fight. They're one of the quests is disrupting the shifty blades of gray that can depower them. So you actually go to their temple and desecrate it or turn it off or whatever, and then that can weaken them. There's a quest where you have to procure I had to write all these notes down. It's a 300-page fucking product. You can procure a meeting with the leader of the Knoll group, the Cackle Gang, for a shady deal, but you have to survive a nasty pit with an alpha grick. These are all neat ideas. They're all the same kind of side quest thing, though. Again, it's all a couple paragraphs. We don't get like maps or anything for these events. They're all usually maybe just one encounter. And that's kind of what this adventure is. It's a lot of that makeup, but what's neat is you've got the main quest is basically just you doing these gladiatorial matches, but it is very cool that it's this entire product is so much more than that. There is a lot of things you can do in between. So you can do all these quests with these gladiators, or you could do quests for other people, or you could just go participate in other things. There's, little carnival games you can play. There's different things you can explore. There's just people you can chat with. There's erotic poetry you can go at, kind of like a pseudo brothel area just to hang out with. Like if your players just love exploring neat areas and doing things on their own without necessarily that strong narrative quest hook, then I think they would get a lot of fun out of this. I think from a DM standpoint, this is not what I would say like a new DM friendly adventure, because it's basically like an open world side quest heavy location. That location being the entire over 24, I believe, different locations in that unique kind of not quite Underdark, but Dungeon of the Mad Mage kind of area, which I think can be very compelling. It's just a lot of this is very, very overwhelming to try and parse and figure out, at least for me in my DM style. Chapter 6, so we're at page 126, and now we finally got into the arena. That's how much backstory and additional stuff, all NPCs, all these different things, side quests and everything. That's how much there is before we finally get to actual arena combat, which is cool. Like, you know, this supposed to be played out over several days. There's different rounds. Basically, the designer suggests that you pair them up with the most compelling people. It's supposed to be random seeds and everything, but, you know, make it so it's the most fun matches for them in every step of the way. We do get one full color map of the arena itself, and that's basically the only color map we get. The other maps, almost nothing is mapped previously, by the way. And then the big maps are, I believe, the area below the arena and the airship and the Games Master's like laboratory mansion place. Because those are like the for sure, like, hey, there's kind of dungeony battle stuff going on in these locations. And none of those are full color at all. In fact, they have like it's not Dyson Logos doing it, but it's that logo style map where it's the little hash marks and not very detailed and all that, which I am not at all a big fan of. So that's a big bummer, even though I understand why we didn't need a lot of maps for the previous stuff, because it is a lot of kind of one-off encounters and side quests. I did like the region map, which had color, thankfully, and this arena map, thankfully, because we're spending a lot of time there. There is a lot of great notes in here about, again, all these different power-ups you can create, the monster pits, the rules about blacklisting spells, the rules about how much they can fly, there's laser beams that can go off, there's teleportations, how to work the crowd, how to procure the very Hunger Games-esque, like, oh, that crowd member loves you, and they're going to send you a healing potion that comes in on like a bat, but other people can grab it. Like, it's really fucking insane how many rules and things there are for the arena, but that works pretty well because that's pretty much your whole thing, is all about working through that combat encounter and going day to day in the matches. So I think that could be a very compelling story. Locations, there's just a shit ton here. This is one of the most impressive parts of this adventure, the fact that it's so much more than just those arena combat encounters. You know, dozens of locations. Let's see, I'll just read off what I wrote down. The arena, the People's Plaza, a casino, a Hall of Champions, a VIP and Gladiatorial lounge, carnival games, etc. There's a huge number of magic and sci-fi items for sale in this chapter. You can purchase grenades, you can purchase your own oozes, dinosaurs, guns, a bag of peeing, because who wants to leave their seat? There's the souped up combat wheelchair called the Dragon Chair. You can engage in a ton of mini games, activities, events. You can rescue the dinosaurs who are being sold. You can discover intriguing messages on the airship. You can listen to erotic poetry. You can play carnival games. You can get a magical tattoo. Just absolutely incredible amount of crazy shit you can do. I mean, just the magic items alone, there's just dozens and dozens of these as you go through. It is just about overwhelming, but again, if you can handle it, there's a lot of really great stuff going on here. There's the actual airship, which does come into play during a pretty fun climax, which transitions us to we're going to skip to chapter 8, which is events. So this is the actual, again, the whole thing is basically just events. This is further events that aren't technically tied to any particular gladiator or NPC that was mentioned further, because unfortunately, in order to find all these events, you kind of have to read just the entire book. The organization, I'm not going to knock it for organizing because there's just so much content here, but it is a little tricky because you have to I found myself having to flip through different pages pretty consistently. But I would also make that a complaint for most of the official 5e campaign adventure books as well. I just get it. It's very hard to try to create a location hub-based setting and how do you organize that. That is pretty tricky. So events involve stealing the airship plans from aboard the airship, participating in a fun orc feast ritual, a classic rodeo event with an aurochs. There's a really crazy parade, which is this Dance of the Dead parade, which has all these different floats and cool, like, it's a good way of really portraying the fact that there's so many different diverse peoples and creatures here, and they all got different. It's just all coming together for this big, sporting match basically, which is awesome. And then one of the things that happens is this really creepy Dance of the Dead, where these like spectral doves come out and grab people and turn into masks and turn them into undead, and then they join the parade as the new undead, as a supposed to be a tie to the three dead lords, which is very creepy and cool. But again, it's an event that happens. Like, it's not an overarching main quest. There's no sinister villain behind all. It's just something that happens that your players can be involved with. The other big one is that Kiss of Death group. The two vampire spawns are like attacking people during the parade, so you can kind of thwart them, which is a neat thing, but there's no map for it. And again, it's just kind of a one-off event that happens, and then they just end up fleeing. It's not part of an overarching, main quest area where it's like, here, this happens in this chapter, this happens in this chapter, which is little bit of a turnoff for me in how at least I run most of my games. So I will say after all that, it does end very well. There is 2 fun things that happens at the end. One of them, you are, sensibly, hopefully you've won the big, gladiatorial match, or you've really messed up your player that, and you go on the celebration aboard the airship, the Bloodweiser, and the Xanathar just attacks. So hopefully Xanathar survived Dungeons Dragon Heist. And really just whether wins or loses, he is taking over this area and destroying this ship and just wrecking havoc. Which, again, doesn't really have a personal motivation other than just a villain doing villain shit. But it's a really cool climax because it involves like a huge army of, the Beholder, bugbears on these flying, like tensors, floating discs things, harpies launching an aerial attack, while he's got like a doppelganger on the inside who is secretly the head of security, and the players have to fight all that off, which is just really, really fun and cool. And then you're invited to the Games Master's, which is Chapter 9, mansion, where you find out that he's, very debilitating and he's trying to extend his own life. But instead of going with the Lich thing, he's discovered cloning, and he clones all of his champions in order to then pay them less money, send them out into the world, and he petrifies the real ones. There's a whole big dark twist there. It's a shame this wasn't a better looking map, because this could be a nice little climactic dungeon crawl at the end. That involves a lot, by the way. There's already a lot going. We're on page 256 right now. And you think, okay, we just did this big climactic airship battle. Now we're going to meet with the boss and be done. No, you've actually got a lot left of this fucking campaign. You got to meet with the Games Master. He wants you to play Double or Nothing, which involves this death trap tile game that's like something out of Tomb of the Nine Gods. You step on each one and all they do different things. You're trying to make it through this whole little game. And then if you survive that, you get to battle him, and he transforms his throne into this big mechanized, like Wild Wild West style spider thing. And then he can sick his other little minions on you. You're trying to get into his like cloning lab, and then his fucking like vault. And this is where it starts losing me, because you already fought the big bad Games Master, and now to get into the actual vault, you have to involve all this other crap. There's a Mummy Lord layer in here. Like, it just gets a little bit much. At some point, you've hit the climax, and you can't keep like that needle at the top. Like, you need to have some falling action. And the designer's like, no, we're gonna keep this up. We're gonna keep doing this. There's still more content left in this. If this were a video game I'm playing, I'd be like, all right, come on, man, I am done. Let me roll credits. Like, I'm done with this adventure. It's a little too much, which is kind of how I feel about the entire book, even though I do think it's really good content overall. All right, we're already past 30 minutes, and I knew this one was going to be a hard one and take me a while, but we're going to go over my pros and cons for Dragonbowl. I guess we can sit here on let's see, where's the arena? There we go. Pro, incredibly comprehensive details on Dragonbowl's history, staff, rules, and locations. So just, that's a pro, right? All the information we have is remarkable. It's a staggering amount of information on how to run the arena, all the NPCs that are involved, all the different events and things, the backstory, everything is just comprehensive is the word. Pro, interesting adventure hooks for different party motivations. I kind of glossed over that, but basically you can just have, hey, does your party want to participate in these games? Then, here's the different, here's money. You can be bankrolled because of Dragon Heist. You can be bankrolled by Mert the Moneylender. You can have a personal quest with that almost seems like something out of Squid Game, where one of the characters is like, hey, my brother was a champion, and now I want to find out what happened to him. Can you help me figure it out? So I really like that different variations. Pro, fun handouts, trackers, and contracts. So actual handouts you give your players so they can sign the contract and have that be all flavored and written in that style is really fun. There's also just a lot of really neat handouts with the messages and other, as much as the maps mostly disappointed me, the handouts did not. They were very well done. Pros, neat tie-ins and connections to Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Dungeon of the Mad Mage, 2 adventures that I'm not super familiar with because I reviewed them, but it was years ago. But they're obviously using, Xanathar, Jarlaxle, I recognize a lot of those names, and the fact that it's level 6, so it takes place pretty much after Dragon Heist, and really pulls together a lot of those NPCs and characters, and because it takes place, I believe, in Undermountain, so again, that's Dungeon of the Mad Mage, so really particularly great integration into those 2 campaigns. And pro, an awesome climactic battle with Xanathar forces attacking an airship, and the final showdown with the Games Master. I do think, as much as I don't think it has a great overarching story, I think it does end well, even though it it stretches it on for too long, which I don't include that as a specific complaint. I will just have the overarching climax works for me. All right, cons. It lacks a strong central narrative in favor of multiple events, side quests, and NPCs, which is a very rare con that I kind of gave it a compliment sandwich almost. Which is to say, you know, I was really hoping there was at least a very obvious main through line with the main quest, you know, some kind of central NPCs that you're working with. Instead of, the designer kind of threw a bunch of things at the board and expects the DM to just kind of pick and choose what they want to run with, which is one way of designing it. But I would have preferred at least one, you know, very clear cut, you know, hey, here we're just, you know, like that following the Mira, whatever character is, or you're trying to find her brother, and, you know, that's your main quest, or you're trying to, you know, overthrow the games master, figure out what's going on with the games, you know, that could be a main quest. Or maybe you're investigating, you know, somebody gets murdered and you're investigating that as a main quest. You know, all of this can happen on top of doing the actual arena events and being a gladiator. So to me, that was really lacking in this adventure, to where it almost feels more like a source book or a setting versus a campaign adventure, compared to a lot of the, you know, hundreds of pages of campaign adventures we have. Con, only a handful of battle maps, and they're logos, and they're mostly logo style black and white maps. So you know, unfortunately, as awesome as the content is, the map part of it I think is a letdown. We get the one good location map, the region map, and then the arena map are both pretty solid. And then basically nothing else is mapped except for those few things at the end, and those aren't given full color, nice detailed map treatment, which is a bummer. And the con, I did include that there's way too many NPCs and events to keep track of. So I ultimately did include kind of, there's too much content as a con, which is a bummer. I hate doing that, but it just, I think I would have preferred fewer NPCs and have at least some of them be more meaningful in the story. I think would have gone a lot further with me ultimately. Instead of throwing like dozens and dozens, I mean, and there's just too many teams, like that. Yeah, they're fun, but if you're gonna do that, make it so, okay, here's all the teams, you know, pick like 4 or 5 of them that you like, and then use those, and, you know, break down the number of gladiatorial combats into this. It feels like there's just too much going on here, to the point where it would actually be very overwhelming for a DM to try to run. But I still think it's a thumbs up adventure. The verdict: while lacking an overarching story, Dragonbowl provides an overwhelming suite of NPCs, events, and locations, transforming a series of gladiatorial matches into a hilariously awesome, over-the-top sourcebook. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Christopher, Thomas, Adam, Stan, Nathan, Alex, Cam, William, I'm Loud, Alan, Furcon, and Gold patrons: RPG Papergraphs, Pretty Boy, Newman, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Sklenia, Blood Angel, Veronis, Baboon, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, James, and Kyle. Thank you all very much for your support.